we here in the United States hear the Palestinians did one thing or the Israelis did something else, but we don't really know what really happened. We really don't.
No, we only know what's been reported to us. Okay, and if you listen, as I said, to 3 or 4 different news networks, you'll get 3 or 4 different opinions, and then if you read 3 or 4 different newspapers, the same thing will happen. But you see, I don't consider
and all of that is what builds this prejudice and this hate against whether it's a religion or a nationality. It's what creates it.
Well, I would even go so far as to say, look, I'm not a libertarian, but I do think the old adage of charity begins at home, we should really take a look at things, because we're so quick to help other nations, promise millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, when in this country you have hardworking Americans, forget about religion and forget about color, they're Americans who have no health care, who have to wait for a free clinic to come to their neighborhood so they can be treated because their employer can't pay for their medical. They can't afford medical, and the only time they see a doctor is when a clinic comes to town. The richest country in the world. And I defy anybody.
And how many times? How many times has the millions of dollars that we've given away to other countries actually ended up in the pocket of a czar or a tyrant who started killing his own people and violating human rights on his own people with the money that we gave?
You're right.
And how many times did we promote a new leader to take over a country, and he turned out to be a tyrant as well? We seriously need to really take a deep look inside before we start, hate crimes and everything else that we have going on in this country that are created by propaganda from the television, and the government just keeps giving money to those guys who end up killing their own people.
Well, the greatest example of that would be when England was when Russia invaded Afghanistan in 1980, and we backed the
Bin Laden.
We backed Bin Laden. I forgot the name of it escapes me.
Bin Laden.
No. No, I know Bin Laden, but
Taliban. We certainly helped.
No, not the Taliban. But in any event, what happened was he took issue because when there was no more threat as far as we were concerned, we abandoned them. Okay, and he developed this hatred towards America. Okay. Or even the present day, arming the Iraqi soldiers with billions of dollars of war equipment, only to have them flee in the presence of ISIS because they were worried for their lives, and all that military, the tanks and the guns and the bombs are now being used against what we would consider an allied faction. President's trying to put together this coalition. They're using our very weapons against us.
Yep. And that's what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else. So
we took down Saddam Hussein under false pretenses. He never had weapons of mass destruction. He had nothing to do with the 9/11 tragedy, but meanwhile, as somebody else said, America's great in getting into a war, but we have no way to exit. We have no exit strategy. We left no one really in control. At least, look, Saddam Hussein murdered a lot of his people. But the bottom line is, he kept the rebels in check. Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, dictator, for a couple of decades, but he kept the rebels in check. These people aren't there anymore. Okay? Afghanistan was always Afghanistan. Hannibal couldn't even conquer Afghanistan. He couldn't even get his elephants across Afghanistan. So what makes you think that we're going to have any better luck than anybody else? So, I mean, all these examples, and now there's no one leader of any one country, so we don't know who to befriend and who's going to fight on our side and what the end result is going to be. We backed the Arab Spring 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, 4 years ago, when they ousted Mubarak. And then the Muslim Brotherhood came in, and the government that they set up in Egypt was not one that was conducive to our liking. But the problem is, it was their election. It's not our election. When you provide free elections for a people, you have to live with the results. You can't, here, I have to laugh because Republicans are so worried about improper voting, but I mean, you don't know what the end result is going to be. I mean, just look at the UK and Scotland. No one knew how that vote was going to turn out until the very end.
Yep.
Yeah.
She agreed with you. That's
I was going to say that
Yeah,
we can't guarantee that the government that's going to be set up by a country is going to be one that we're going to like. But the bottom line is, you got to live with it. And that's it.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but I also think that, this day and age, any developed country, whether it's the United States or Germany or Great Britain or any developed country, I think should be so far past all of this. It's just amazing to me, and we should be, setting standards for the rest of the world to live by. And so, when we elect our leaders, how do we get around to a better job of vetting them and determining who's actually going to be right? And the only thing we have is propaganda. And, that propaganda, unfortunately, is what also leads to this whole conversation about whether it's racism or, people hating whether it's a Jewish or Italians, or it doesn't matter. It all boils down to the same thing. It's just ridiculous, and it makes me insane when I hear people, like I said, my age and younger, holding issues of any kind with any other nationality or religion, because from the time we are in preschool, we're taught about these things. We're taught the history of it. We're taught the past, and we should know better.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I am thinking, though, about something that Q said when we were talking about Al Sharpton, and he happened to say, well, Al Sharpton would not be accepted by black groups if he started to champion white causes. He said, look what happened to Martin Luther King. But that was...
But isn't that just another of racism, biasness? And you know what? If we don't like the guy, and nobody likes him, and nobody agrees with him, and we ignore him, how does he end up in a position of power and authority anyway?
You're talking about Sharpton? Or just anyone. In general?
Anyone, yeah.
Anyone. Well, his base is the black community. You happen to live in New York for a while, so you should be very aware of the things that he says and the things that he does. And it's only recently that he has a voice. He's given a voice on liberal cable news, where he's trying, I wouldn't say whether it's successful or not, but he's trying to mellow a little. But there are many many instances of not just black on black or white on black, but black on white violence, and I don't see him saying anything about that. I think that he would gain. True, he might lose a little bit of support in the black community, but he might be viewed by people in general as being open-minded. He only seems to point out things that pertain to the black community. I remember when I was teaching, we had a very well-known psychiatrist called Dr. Dees. And he lived in Springfield Gardens area, and he was a poet, he was an author, he was a public speaker, and a psychiatrist. And he came to school and spoke in the assembly. After which, I had one of my SP classes, and they said to me, Mr. Kinnickson, he wasn't talking to us. He was talking to the black kids. And, I tried to be very open-minded, but the bottom line is he was. At that point in time, the school was not totally African-American or Latino, but we did have a small, granted a very small, percentage of white students. And it was even some of the black students in the SP class that said, I understand what you're saying. It was his discussion was geared toward one group of people, while totally ignoring the other students who were sitting in the assembly. And that's what I blame Sharpton of. He's got a chance to reach across the aisle and to try to make peace and be a true negotiator. And I don't see him doing that. All he does is turn up in Florida during the Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin incident, going to Ferguson, Missouri, and being very vociferous in the church, while at the same time, Captain Ron Johnson from the state police in Ferguson, who lived in the neighborhood, in the community, and happened to be a black man, was much more subdued in his language and meeting the people and speaking with them than Sharpton was. But is he not guilty? But is he not guilty of the same behavior of so many of the people from his generation, regardless of their nationality or color of their skin or whatever? So many people of his generation have that same type of personal agenda. And that's just what I think is drives all of this. And I think it's up to us, the younger generation, to be able to see that, ignore it, and move on peacefully. It would be nice. Okay, it would be nice, but as of now, no, it's not going to happen. The only thing that, and if you listen, you hear the only thing that some people hear is the loud, vociferous rhetoric coming out of the mouths of other people. That seems to make a difference. If somebody gets up there and speaks very calmly, let's say the way I am or the way you are, they're not going to listen to us. But if you raise your voice and you pound a podium, and you start pointing fingers, all of a sudden everybody's listening to you. Well,
that's how you get elected.
Thank you, Felix, and that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. That's what has to stop. If we really want all of this chaos in the world to stop, we we have to start looking at the people that are standing in front of us. And if someone's standing in front of me screaming